This is going to be our video for Unit 3, Day 3. So we've been over solving linear equations now. We've talked about working with algebraic expressions. Today we're solving literal equations. What that means is equations that involve one or more variables. These are called literal equations. When we solve a literal equation, we're always going to be solving for a specific variable. And you'll see what that looks like in a second. What that means is we're going to isolate that variable, whatever variable that is, on one side of the equation, which means get the variable by itself. Alright, once we've done that, it's solved. We've done it. So we did this for solving linear equations, right? We always moved our x terms to one side, our numbers to the other, and then divided to solve for x. Solving a literal equation, we're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to add, subtract, and divide. But now it's going to be variables instead of numbers. So our answers when we're solving a literal equation it's not going to be a number like it was when we were solving a linear equation. What's going to be is an algebraic expression. So it's still going to have variables in our answer. Alright, but as long as we isolate our target variable on one side, then we've solved it. Alright, one thing to note, if we move everything off of one side, that side will be equal to 0. Alright, and that's something we're going to use later on when we start working with quadratics. This process where we're moving everything around, what this is called, the skill we're trying to work on here is called algebraic manipulation. Which just means moving things around in an equation. So here's an example of solving a literal equation. So here's our equation. We're going to solve 5a plus 8b minus c is 19. We're going to solve it for b. Alright, so that's what we're going to call our target variable. Alright, that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify our target variable. Alright, so we're going to look in the equation. Whenever we see the target variable, we're just going to put some kind of identification around it. Alright, next what we're going to do is we're going to, any other variable term besides that one, we're going to move it over. Alright, by move over, whatever that means, adding and subtracting. Alright, so for step 2, I look at it, I have two different variable terms. I have the a terms, so I'd subtract 5a to move those over. And I have the c terms, so I'd add c to move those over. Alright, so the only thing on the other side is 19. Alright, so this 19 doesn't have variable a or variable c. None of these are like terms. We don't combine them, we just put them all on the other side. So next thing we're going to do is just like we did linear equations, we're going to divide by the coefficient, if there is one. So in this case, coefficient left hanging on our target variable is going to be 8. So we're going to divide everything by 8. So we just make it one big fraction over 8. Last step, our last step on live solving equations is simplify if it's possible. Alright, on this one, there's nothing we can simplify, but if 19 over 8 simplified or 5 over 8 simplified, we would simplify that. But since we have b isolated on one side of the equation, we solve for b. So that's what it means to solve a linear equation for a specific variable. So there's 8 problems down there below where you can practice doing that. Solving all these equations for a specific variable. The indicated variable is going to be the one in parentheses. So for example, on number 1, t would be your target. So go through and practice those. You got 8 questions there. 8 questions there to practice. So this changing gears a little bit here. Now we're going to talk about quadratic equations. So we're moving away from literal equations back to talking about quadratic equations now, which is what we're going to be covering for the rest of the unit. So quadratic equation is equation with degree of 2. Right, so again, we talked about degree on the first day. Its highest power of the variable is 2. Alright, so x squared type of terms. So what's different now is when we solve linear equations, first degree, we got one answer. When we solve quadratic equation, we're going to get 2 answers. Alright, we also call these answers sometimes referred to as solutions. That means the same thing. So whenever we start solving a quadratic equation, we're going to learn a bunch of different ways to do that. We always have to start by putting it in standard form. Alright, so standard form is something else to talk about on the first day. 2 things make standard form for polynomial. The first thing is descending order. So here, for quadratic, we know our highest power would be 2, then our linear term, then our constant term. For standard form for quadratic, it's also nothing on the other side, equal to 0. That's what we're going to see as we get into solving. The reason we put it into standard form first is because these numbers A, B, and C are what we use to actually solve. Quadratic equations. So before we can solve any equation, we have to be able to recognize what kind of equation it is. So we have to be able to recognize when we have a quadratic equation, so we know to solve it that way. Recognize if we have a linear equation, we know we have plain x. Quadratic means we're looking for x squared. Let's look through each one of these, see if it's quadratic. So number 1 is quadratic, right? This is our highest degree term, x squared. So this is a quadratic equation. Alright, number 2, same idea. There's only one term over here, is x squared. X squared is quadratic, so this one is also quadratic. So number 3, alright, we have 2 different x squared terms. We got an x squared term here, I have an x squared term here. So what we can do is combine them, put it in standard form, and now we can see clearly, yes, this is quadratic. Right, again, what makes all these quadratic is at the highest degree. When it's the standard form, we look at that leading term has degree 2. Alright, last one's a little tricky. Sometimes we look at this, I think we don't see an x squared. Maybe it's not quadratic, but if we actually go through the process of putting it in standard form, see it is quadratic. Right, and that came from subtracting 4. So again, just like the other ones, we have our leading term, x squared. So this one is also quadratic, even though it didn't look like it at first. Alright, so here we're going to practice is putting quadratic equations into standard form. That's always our first step before we solve. Tomorrow we learn to solve. Today we're just going to practice putting in standard form. Remember, there's two things that make standard form. One is a descending order, so we can tell what A, B, and C are. And the second thing is that it has to be equal to 0. So if we look at one like number 1, right, it's already in descending order, but it's not equal to 0. So that's what we have to do, is make this side equal to 0. And to do that, we're going to subtract 5x. Right, just like moving terms around, like practicing solving literal equations, or moving terms over in the equation we're not solving, we're just moving them around. Alright, now it's descending order, x squared, then x, and constant, and equal to 0, so it's standard form. Alright, one thing we do is make sure we're only combining like terms. So same idea on number 2, be the last example we do, and then you'll have some time to try some on your own. See, we have descending order on both sides of this equation, but it's not equal to 0 on either side, so that's what we have to do. So in this case, we have to move two terms over. I have to move an x squared term over, and I have to move a constant term over. So now I have one side set equal to 0. So I have to be careful what goes on this side. So I have 2x squared minus x squared is x squared. 14x is my only linear term, so that comes next, and 45 is my only constant term. So we don't combine the 14x and the 45 because they're not like terms. So that's the one thing to be careful of while we're doing this. Alright, so there's 4 more examples here. You can try these on your own, putting them in standard form. And there's also a second page if you go on the Canvas site that is attached to this file, so you can get some more practice recognizing quadratic equations, also putting them into the standard form. Tomorrow we're going to go through our first example of how we actually go through and solve these quadratic equations.